This is a Pulp Archive recording. All public Pulp Archive recordings are licensed under Creative Commons. For more information or to support us, please visit patreon.com/pulparchive. This episode was prepared by Soul and narrated by Edward, the digital narrator. An Arc of Direction by Junius B. Smith. Weird Tales, June 1925. This episode contains period-typical depictions of crime, violence, and mild profanity. Listener discretion is advised. The younger man cast the stub of his cigarette from the open window and laughed. "Your theories are absurd, my dear Elton. If a man could always tell when to sow and when to reap, his fortune would be assured." "Exactly," Elton agreed, fingering the pages of a book on astrology, which he evidently had been perusing when the other came in. After a moment, he continued, "Naturally, you don't believe one may look into the future." "If you want my candid opinion, I do not. I may say I will have coffee for breakfast, but I am not certain of it. I may be dead when breakfast time comes." He rolled another cigarette and set it alight. "I may not even finish the smoke in my mouth," he added, as he tossed the still blazing match out of the window. Elton viewed the act with a little frown upon his face. "I am afraid, friend Hall, that to you fate will be fate indeed, for you act without due thinking. For instance, how do you know where that cigarette stub went, or the match that followed it? For all you know, it may have struck a tender spot, and I may be seeking accommodations elsewhere tonight." "Tut tut. There is nothing outside but some vines running up the wall, as they do over at my place, and some flowers and grass on either side. The cement walk, I saw all that. The last time you showed me your horticultural skill. You assume there has been no change. You do not really know, and one who trusts in chance has his destiny fixed by the stars. Just when and where were you born?" Hall took the cigarette from his lips as Elton reached for a sheet of paper on which to make the notation. "You are really not serious, old dear? Surely you don't take any stock in that exploded thing? Let us talk about something worthwhile." "We are doing just that. I am curious as to the date of your demise." Hall shrugged his shoulders. "Poppycock, if I didn't know you as a successful businessman, I'd think something was wrong with your head. I don't know but that there is anyway. A doctor once told me that everybody was crazy on at least one subject. Nobody ever told me what subject I am bugs on, and I suppose no one knows his pet failing, nor believes anyone who tells him. So you think you can tell when I'm going to die? That's rich. I don't know myself." "You will, if you give me the information I ask." "By cracky. I believe you believe. You can tell. I'll bet you a quart of pink lemonade against that one lunged fiver of yours that I outwear your dilapidated tires." "Maybe so, maybe so. I can't tell when you are going to die, if you don't tell me where and when you were born." In the end, Hall gave the information asked. "And now what?" asked the younger man. "Shall I wait while you diagnose my case, or shall I return at some later date?" "Just as you like," Elton replied. "It involves considerable work, so perhaps you'd better call around in a week from now." It was a month before Hall again visited his friend. When he did, it was with no intention of learning his fate, as foretold by the stars, but rather upon another matter. Nor was the subject brought up by him, though what he said directly opened the question, "I am going to be married in September." Elton considered the statement for a moment, but said nothing. "Sweetest girl you ever saw," Hall amplified. Still no comment. "You are to stand up with me if you will. It was that which brought me here today." "I am glad you came." Elton at last broke his silence. "I was about to set forth and find you. Your announcement does not come as a surprise to me, for such an attachment is shown in your horoscope for this time. But, and he weighed his words carefully, if you really want the girl, you had better marry her. Immediately, of course, she might object to being left a widow so soon. Shall I call a doctor for you, Elton? You talk as if you are sick. I am not sick and I don't need a doctor. But in all seriousness, friend Hall, you need a nurse or at least a bodyguard in the very near future, for according to my calculations, on the 10th of next month, unless you do something to prevent it, you will most assuredly be hanged. Hall looked at Elton for a full half-minute, then spoke. You surely don't believe that bunk. If you are joshing, I think you have gone far enough. I was never more serious in my life. According to my calculated arcs of direction— Arcs of what? Hall involuntarily exclaimed. Arcs of direction. Planetary angulations we astrologers calculate to tell when a designated result will materialize. Oh, I see. First you tell what is going to happen to a fellow, and then when— So I am going to be hanged on the 10th of next month. Quick work. I haven't killed anybody yet, and they don't hang them that soon, even if I should go out and kill somebody between now and then. Oh, there are lots of ways you might get hanged. Some over-enthusiastic citizens, for instance, might string you up to the nearest telegraph pole or convenient limb. You wouldn't be the first man who had suffered a vicarious death. Quit it, Elton. You are making my nerves jumpy. He moved toward the window and looked out. I'll miss you greatly, Elton replied. Let me tell the girl all about it. Maybe she'll marry you at once to take care of you. Get a bodyguard or do something. Believe me a fool if you like, but don't take a chance. Fate has an unkind way of pulling mean little tricks. You gloomy old cuss. You scared me out of a year's growth. You look as if you were attending my funeral already. The 10th of the following month came, and Hall had taken no precautionary measures. Every time he thought of what Elton told him, he felt sorry for Elton. His mind was undoubtedly slipping. Pity, too. Genius and insanity were very close together. He lay in bed and looked up at the ceiling and pondered about what his friend had told him. This was the day he was to be hanged. He never felt any farther from death than he did that very minute. Of course, he might walk out on the street and something unforeseen befall him. All in all, perhaps it were better to remain in his home all day. In bed, even. Only that seemed plumb foolish. On second thought, he would remain indoors. There was no use taking chances, as Elton had pointed out. There was nothing he had to do, so he might as well do it at home as elsewhere. Of course, Elton had wanted him to provide a bodyguard, some sort of a companion who could cut him down, perhaps, but that was beside the question. What need did he have of a bodyguard? The bodyguard might hang him. His mind began all sorts of queer gymnastics. He was nervous. In spite of himself, he crawled out of bed when the sun, shining through the open window, drove him to it. After a shower, he slowly dressed. Suddenly, an idea hit him. Elton's so cocksure. I'm going to die today. I believe I'll phone him and tell him to come over. That's killing two birds with one stone. He'd make an excellent bodyguard. That is, if he isn't crazy. And we can play chess, which will— while the hour's away. Yep. I'll get him on the phone immediately. And he did. Was just coming over anyway, Elton told him. Hall made some toast and poached an egg. His appetite wasn't very keen. Living alone in a 2-story house and doing his own cooking when not eating at a cafeteria was getting monotonous, to say the least. He was glad he was to be married in September. It would be different when he had a wife to take charge of the home which had been left him by his parents. His frugal meal finished, He ran upstairs to get his chessboard and men. The sunlight was pouring through the window in added volume. It was too beautiful a day to be cooped up, but he'd forget about all that when he and Elton got to playing chess. He decided he might as well make his bed while waiting for Elton, and busied himself in that occupation. Then he went to the open window and looked out. Elton should be coming any minute. Now, speeding autos flashed to and fro. The honk of an occasional horn sounded warning. An old horse, pulling a still older express wagon, rattled past. The driver hunched on his seat. A bicycle or two added variety, and men, women, and children sauntered, hurried, or ran along the walks, according to what each was intent upon doing. Hall wondered if any of those down upon whom he was looking would turn aside long enough to hang him. His face lighted with rather an amused smile. He'd have to talk to the doctor about Elton. It wasn't good for a man to get such crazy notions into his head. His eyes drifted to his immediate yard. A bird cooed and scolded its fledglings in the evergreen tree not a dozen feet away. He watched it feed its young. A hummingbird whizzed past his face, its invisible wings fanning the air with great rapidity. From flower to flower it darted on the creeping vines. Beside the house, he watched it lazily, fascinated by its beauty, its daintiness, the music of its flight. Was it possible that he, in the midst of life, was on the threshold of death? Into his reverie broke the hum of a motor, strangely familiar to his ears. It was Elton's car, he had no doubt. He strained his eyes to catch sight of it and confirm his guess. Then he turned to go downstairs and let Elton in. On the morning of the 10th, Elton became very uneasy. He was sincere in what he had told his friend Hall. He feared, however, that Hall would disregard the warning and come to disaster. Since, in most likelihood, Hall would not provide himself with a bodyguard, why not be that bodyguard himself? So, Elton reasoned. It was precisely at the time when he made up his mind to attend Hall all that day that Hall telephoned him. He got his car from the garage and inspected the bright front tire, concerning which Hall had been kidding him on more than one occasion. It was about ready to go out, but this was no time to change it. He could do that when he got to Hall's place, or later, or let it go until it did blow out. He was just slowing as he drew close to Hall's residence to make the turn into the driveway on the north of the house, when the tire went out with a loud bang. He turned into the driveway on the rim, stopped, and quickly changed tires. He might as well get it over with before going into the house, so he could wash up when he did go in. The tire changed. He went to the front door and pushed the bell. No answer came. He knocked long and loudly. Still no answer. Worried at the silence, he started along the cement path that led to the rear, around the south side of the house, and paused to stand aghast at what he saw as he turned the corner. As Hall turned, with intention of leaving the open window to admit his friend, the latter's tire had exploded. Hall, whose nerves were jumpy as a result of his friend's dire foreboding, started, lost his balance, and fell backward out of the window. He clutched at the vines held to the side of the wall by the metal netting, but they gave and tore away and let him continue to fall. And then one more tenacious than the rest held, but it wrapped its sinuous length around his neck. He fought and clutched at the wire-like fiber, but the noose slipped only tighter. He was almost dead. When Elton cut him down, The House, the Light, and the Man by Gordon Phillip, England. Weird Tales, June 1925. This episode contains period-typical depictions of crime, violence, and mild profanity. Listener discretion is advised. It is not to be wondered at that this man became a maniac. The house sits back some distance from the highway. All else around is pleasing to the view, but this dark, grim building is a blot on the landscape, encircled by a tall, ragged hedge, which conceals the lower part of the building from the eyes of passers-by. It seems almost like a portion of another world, and has little in common with neighboring dwellings. People going by glance up at the gloomy edifice with feelings akin to terror, then hurry on. After turning a curve in the road beyond, they breathe a sigh of relief, feeling as a prisoner freed from captivity might feel. That is during daytime. At night, few pedestrians are daring enough to pass that dwelling. Even motorists, when realizing they have reached its vicinity, nervously increase their speed and, sweeping by in a swirl of dust, leave the gloomy pile far behind. Yet few can pass without first turning their eyes toward a narrow window near the top of the building. For from that window gleams the light, and they know that in the room behind the casement is the man who fears the dark. They know the light is always there during hours of darkness, and will doubtless always be there while the man lives. Once, it happened some weeks after the man had come, the light went out, and even yet, though that was 15 years ago, dwellers in nearby houses shudder when they remember the sounds that were heard on that occasion. The unearthly shrieks, the piercing cries of utter anguish, the screams of direst terror, all these ring in their ears as they recall that evening. And nightly, before retiring, they pray that the light may not go out. Their prayer has been mercifully answered. For when the first shadows of twilight begin to fall, the light also appears to burn with steady, undiminished power until darkness is past. It has never gone out again, and probably never will until the man dies. Then, and not until then, it will be extinguished. Gibson Jenkins pressed the elevator bell impatiently. He glanced down the shaft expectantly, but the elevator did not appear. He waited several minutes. Still, it did not come. Jenkins was much annoyed. He had now been waiting nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes seems a long time to a man who is in a hurry. It was the first time Gibson Jenkins had ever been in this department store. He had gone to see the manager that afternoon to transact an item of business. While they had been discussing terms, the telephone had rung, and after taking the message, the manager had gone out, telling Jenkins he would be back within 5 minutes. 5 minutes had lengthened into a half hour, but the manager had not returned. Had Jenkins but known it, there had been excellent reason for his non-appearance. While attempting to cross the street ahead of traffic, he had been knocked down by a motor car and was now in an ambulance en route to a repair shop. Jenkins, of course, was unaware of this. However, he had decided not to wait longer and was now standing peering down the elevator shaft, muttering anathemas against managers and elevator boys alike. After ringing several more times, he suddenly remembered that the closing whistle had blown several minutes before and realized the elevator boy had left the building. He also remembered having seen a flight of stairs at the other end of the corridor, so he went back to look for them. It was growing dark inside the building. Jenkins noticed this and glanced at his watch nervously. It was exactly 15 minutes past 6. Jenkins disliked darkness and had no desire to remain in the store longer. Hurrying to the stairway, he commenced the descent hastily. Haste is not always expedient. Jenkins was too hasty. Consequently, his foot slipped. He lost his balance and plunged downward. His head struck the bottom step rather forcibly, and, the step being composed of cement, he immediately lost interest in his surroundings. Gibson Jenkins opened his eyes wonderingly. He was much dazed, and some minutes elapsed before he could recall what had occurred. It had been twilight when he had fallen, but it was now very dark. He could not remember ever having been in so dark a place before. Slowly, he sat up and looked around, but it was too dark to see anything. The only thing he could discover was that he was at the bottom of the flight. Drawing his luminous-faced watch from his pocket, he tried to ascertain the time of night. It was exactly 15 minutes past 6. This perplexed him. It had been 15 minutes past 6 when he had fallen, hadn't it? How then could it be the same time now? He puzzled over the matter for quite a while without arriving at a satisfactory conclusion. Then a thought leaked through into his slowly clearing brain, and holding the watch to his ear, he listened. Yes, it had stopped. Jenkins pressed tremulous hands against his throbbing temple. How long have I been lying here? He wondered aloud. As if to answer his question, a big clock somewhere in the building began to chime the hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Jenkins struggled to his feet. 11 o'clock. He had been unconscious nearly 5 hours. He began to grope his way up the stairs. He was very weak, but a plan had formulated within his mind. He would go back to the manager's office and telephone for help. But on reaching the top of the steps, he stood bewildered. He had forgotten in which direction the office lay. After a moment, though, he struck blindly through the intense darkness toward where he thought the room ought to be. Having walked several feet, he bumped against a wall. Turning, he walked in the opposite direction, hands before him, seeking for the office door. But it was his head that struck it finally, not his hands struck with such force that the door swung open, and stumbling through the aperture, Jenkins fell upon hands and knees on the floor within. Rising painfully, he groped for the telephone, but though he knocked against other objects in the room, the telephone itself eluded him. Jenkins was now becoming frightened. He was naturally a timid man, and the events of the night had not increased his courage. He tried again to locate the telephone, but still without success. Then he searched his pockets for a match. And, to his surprise, for he was not in the habit of carrying them, he found a solitary lucifer. He lit it and looked eagerly about him. And then the match fell from his palsied fingers to the floor, flickered, and went out. Gibson Jenkins had seen enough. In fact, he had seen too much. He was not in the office after all. He was in a room full of coffins. With a horrified exclamation, Jenkins dashed for the door. And for the second time that night, haste proved his undoing, for he ran directly against it, and it slammed shut. Frantically, Jenkins searched for the doorknob. Finally finding it, he tried to pull the door open. To his horror, it resisted his effort. He pulled harder, exerted every iota of his strength, but the door remained fast. It was equipped with a spring lock. In a corner of the coffin room crouched Gibson Jenkins. He was shivering from head to foot, like a man with the ague. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead and trickled slowly down his cheeks. It was no longer utterly dark in that room. The moon had come up, and her pale rays, streaming through a window, partly illuminated the coffin chamber. Jenkins could make out distinctly the dim shapes of the coffins around him, which were piled one upon another to a height of several feet. Jenkins was not looking at these, however, so much as at a large coffin in the middle of the floor at the opposite side of the room. Upon this one, his attention was riveted. He felt that in this coffin lay danger. He seemed to sense another presence in the room. He could not see it, yet he was, nevertheless, positive it was there, and he was also sure it was the big coffin which contained that dangerous presence. So he squatted huddled in a shaking, shuddering heap, with frightened eyes fixed upon the casket. He remembered many things while crouching there, remembered how he had once laughed at a friend who had related a supernatural experience, and how that friend had warned him, telling him spirits often punish those who dare disbelieve in them. He remembered, too, the ghost stories he had been told and had read, and at the remembrance he shuddered more than before. And he watched the coffin with a feeling that the thing contained therein was watching him also, and was noting his every motion. At the thought, he shrank farther into his corner, seeking to escape its gaze. Yet still it seemed following him. Now, to his horror, Jenkins began to feel a desire to go over to the coffin. He thrust back the desire, but still it gripped him. His body and will were struggling for mastery, and body triumphed. He began moving towards the coffin. He tried to hold back his body, but still it advanced. Nearer and nearer he glided to that dreadful presence. Again the big clock struck 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It was midnight. The sound appeared to paralyze Gibson Jenkins. He no longer moved in the direction of the coffin. Instead, he squatted stock-still in the middle of the chamber. Then, to his consternation, the lid of the coffin began to rise. Higher and higher it rose, until at last the wretched man beheld a form leaving the casket, and then shriek after shriek echoed through the old building. In the morning, attracted by strange sounds emanating from the coffin room, some employees opened the door. There, squatted on the floor, rocking backward and forward, mouthing and gibbering inarticulately, was a white-haired, old-looking man whom none of them recognized. Later, however, they discovered the name Gibson Jenkins on calling cards in his pockets. A few days afterward, the manager, after leaving the hospital, positively identified him. When the employees found him, he was facing a big coffin lying in the center of the room. The lid of the coffin had been raised, and the casket was empty. A window at one end of the room was unlocked and open. It was only a 10-foot drop to the roof of an adjoining building. On the preceding afternoon, a thief had scooped several rings and watches from a tray in the jewelry department on the next floor. The floor walker had given chase, but had lost him in the crowd. The detective at the entrance, however, had claimed the man had not passed him. A thorough search of the building had revealed nothing, though, so it had been thought, the detective had been mistaken. Now the management believed the thief had not left the building after all, but had concealed himself in the coffin, intending to come out later and obtain other booty. He had remained in the casket several hours, wishing to assure himself that the coast was clear before continuing operations. Then Gibson Jenkins had entered the room and by locking the door spoiled the robber's plans, but by making sundry weird noises the burglar had worked upon Jenkins' superstitious nature until he had reduced him to a state of helpless fright. Then, leaving the casket, the thief had made good his escape. That was the theory of the management of the department store. His physician endeavored to make clear that theory to Gibson Jenkins, but Gibson Jenkins was totally unable to understand it. Indeed, as Gibson Jenkins, he no longer existed. He had now become simply a man who feared the dark. 100 yards back from the road stands the house. It is a strange-looking house, a house which people shun. From a window of that house shines the light. In the room whence the light shines is a man afraid of the dark. The window is barred with rusty iron bars, and the house is a madhouse. Thank you so much for hanging out today. My name is Sol, and this is the Pulp Archive. Now, if you had fun, I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, comment, and share. That stuff really helps. And like most stories we cover here, today's was recommended by you. So, if there's a story you'd like to see, send us an email at pulparchivelibrary@gmail.com. We'd love to cover it. If you'd like to support the podcast and keep us going, consider subscribing to our Apple channel or becoming a member on Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/pulparchive. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get access to all our podcasts and private explicit episodes that wouldn't be allowed publicly. We feature almost every genre of pulp fiction, horror, detective, western, and even sports. Special thanks to our patrons who make the podcast possible and make every episode of the Pulp archive happen. Every episode is dedicated to our Patreon members. I truly could not do this without you.